Las Vegas, November 1976. Under the gold lights of the Hilton, Elvis softly told his band, "Play the one she doesn't know I finished." No title, no warning. Then a woman in blue stepped near the stage, and 20,000 people leaned in at once. When he sang the first line, the arena went dead silent. The Las Vegas Hilton showroom breathed like a living thing. Gold lame curtains shivering in the air conditioning, rows of crystal chandeliers putting diamonds in every glance. The hiss of soda guns from the bars around the rim. It was November 1976. The ushers counted programs. Colonel Tom Parker kept a rolled race form in his palm like a baton. And the house manager muttered about the late VIPs pushing past the velvet rope. 20,000 seats were spoken for across 2 shows that weekend. Tonight felt heavier, as if the room had its own pulse. On the stage, the TCB band tuned in short, respectful bursts. James Burton testing a clean lick, Ronnie Tutt feathering the toms, Glenn Hardin wiping his glasses and nodding toward the set list taped to a floor wedge. A silk scarf, white, lay folded on the mic stand, waiting. From the side corridor, Jerry Schilling stepped into the wings and scanned the crowd. The Hilton's sound, half casino clatter, half church hush, rolled forward as the spot op checked his cues. A faint click from the wireless pack, a cough from Roger, the muffled thunk of a camera case shut just in time. Mic click. Then the room stilled 1 degree closer to reverent. Elvis entered the dim like a familiar comet. White suit with gold piping, high collar, a line of rhinestones that caught the first scout of light. He moved lightly, less strut now, more measured glide, as if conserving something precious. He gave Charlie Hodge the smallest chin lift, and Charlie placed a glass of water on the amp and winked. "You got this, E." The band read his shoulders, a fraction tighter before Also Sprach Zarathustra, a fraction looser after the first ovation. Breath in, music up, curtain rise. The opening suite hit like sunrise. Cheers rose, broke, and returned in waves. Elvis smiled the smile people came to remember, then anchored his feet and worked through the early numbers with a craftsman's calm. C.C. Rider snapped awake. I Got a Woman flirted and flashed. He teased the front row with that good-natured grin, tossed a scarf to a woman with trembling hands, and let the room love him the way it had always loved him. Loud, unembarrassed, collective. Yet between songs, a small private weather crossed his face. It passed quickly, but it was there. The look of a man listening for a melody only he could hear. Backstage, Colonel Parker tapped his watch. Jerry checked the side door. The house. Manager whispered to a headset. Keep the service doors closed. Too much hallway noise on the left mic. In the band pit, James Burton leaned in. He's thinking about something, he said, almost to himself. Glenn Hardin glanced at the set list. Hurt circled twice in blue ink and raised an eyebrow. The blue ink mattered. Elvis had circled that title before, then crossed it, then circled it again. Pattern breaker, Glenn thought. He's going to move something. The crowd quieted for the first ballad. Elvis wrapped his voice around it like he was returning an heirloom, careful, grateful, aware of its age. A woman in row C closed her eyes. A veteran in row N clutched his program. When the final chord hung and vanished, applause flared, and then it happened. Instead of the expected vamp into the next up-tempo number, Elvis lifted his hand, and the band stopped clean. No cue, no count. Just his palm in the air, and that half-smile that could disarm a boxing ring. Silence spread like velvet across the tables. Crowd hush. A clink of ice travelled farther than sound should. Elvis looked left, past the proscenium, edge, past the gilt wall panels, to the dark notch of the service entrance. He didn't speak. He simply listened. The room felt it. Something was about to be different. Something was about to bend. Have you ever felt a moment tilt, as if the floor under 1,000 people gently shifted direction? Have you ever known, without words, that someone on stage had brought their whole heart to a place where you expected only a show? Elvis lowered his hand, reached into the inside pocket of his jacket, and touched paper. It stayed there. He didn't pull it out. The gesture was small, almost secret, but Jerry saw it from the wings and stilled. Charlie Hodge, reading the language of his friend's breath, set down the water and didn't move. The set list waited on its tape like a polite suggestion. Elvis looked back at the crowd and exhaled once through his nose, a private count-in. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said softly, and the speakers carried his voice like a confession. We're gonna do something a little different right now. A ripple, a held breath. The spot tightened. In front of 20,000 people, the legendary performer took one small step closer to the microphone as if approaching a chapel rail. The band looked at each other. Ronnie Tutt lifted a brush instead of a stick. James Burton's fingers found a gentler fret. The Hilton held itself very, very still. What happened next would decide the rest of the night and haunt every retelling after. The stage lights softened into amber. Elvis looked down at his set list once more, then folded it quietly and slid it into his pocket. From the wings, Jerry Schilling could sense something was off. Colonel Parker leaned forward, confusion twitching in his jaw. This wasn't part of the plan. The next song on the list should have been Hound Dog. But Elvis didn't move toward the up-tempo mic. He turned to Glenn Hardin instead, his voice low. "Glenn, remember that one from Graceland, the one I told you to hold?" Hardin blinked, then nodded slowly. "You mean that one?" Elvis gave the faintest nod. "Yeah, that one." In the front rows, the audience shifted, murmuring. Someone whispered, "He's changing the show." A light cough echoed through the Hilton ballroom. The cameras paused. Even the casino hum beyond the doors seemed to fade. Then, before the band could start, a ripple of noise stirred at the back of the hall. Security radios crackling, voices urgent. Jerry's headset popped. "Unit 3 to stage left. VIP arrival. Repeat. VIP arrival." Elvis froze mid-breath. His eyes flicked toward the shadowed aisle, where a soft blue dress shimmered beneath the gold light. The crowd didn't notice yet, but he did. Priscilla. For a heartbeat, his face softened. The practiced charm replaced by something quieter, almost reverent. Charlie Hodges' mouth opened, but no sound came. Glenn Hardin stopped touching the keys. Colonel Parker hissed from his seat, "Keep playing, damn it!" But nobody moved. The announcer's voice, steady and trained, filled the pause. "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Elvis Presley." It was a lifeline, but Elvis didn't take it. He stepped closer to the mic and said, "We got someone special in the room tonight." A gasp fluttered through the crowd. Priscilla's head lowered, her hair catching the spotlight in faint gold strands. She hadn't seen him perform in years, not since their separation became public in 1973. Yet here she was, front row, seat A12, blue silk glove resting over her clutch. Elvis cleared his throat, forcing calm. "This one," he said slowly, "wasn't supposed to be finished, but sometimes songs finish themselves." A few in the audience laughed softly, unsure whether it was part of the act. But in the wings, Jerry understood. The man who built his legend on swagger and control was about to let his guard fall. On stage, in front of 20,000 witnesses, Camera pans across silent faces, cigarette smoke curling in the still air. A lone flashbulb pops. Then, softly, Elvis turned to the band. "Let's take it from the top. Key of C." James Burton hesitated. "The secret one." Elvis nodded once. "Yeah, the one she doesn't know I finished." The first note trembled through the room like a held breath. Priscilla looked up, and the crowd went dead silent, because everyone could feel it. Something private was about to be shared in public. What could possibly drive a man to risk his pride for a single unfinished song? The first chords floated into the smoky air, soft and uncertain. Elvis's eyes stayed on the microphone, but every word he sang seemed aimed at one place. Seat A12. Priscilla's hands rested perfectly still in her lap. Around her, the crowd leaned forward, sensing something private unraveling in real time. Backstage, Colonel Parker's face turned crimson. "What the hell is he doing?" he barked into his cigar smoke. "That song's not cleared," Jerry Schilling replied quietly. "It's not about clearance tonight, Colonel." Elvis's voice wavered on the second line, barely noticeable, but it carried the weight of every unspoken apology between them. He didn't need the lyrics sheet. Every word was carved into memory. "If I could hold time like a photograph, I'd keep your smile right where it was last." A simple line, yet it felt like confession. The camera operators didn't dare move. One of them whispered to another, "Is this new?" The reply came hushed. "Nobody's heard it before." Close up on Elvis's fingers trembling over the mic, soft hum of the amp, close-ups of audience members in quiet disbelief. Then, chaos. Security began murmuring through their radios again. A man had stood up near the aisle, shouting Elvis's name, waving a record sleeve for an autograph. For a moment, everything teetered between order and collapse. Colonel Parker slammed his hand on the table. "Shut it down if they rush the stage." But Elvis lifted his hand mid-song, signaling the guards to stand down. "No," he said gently, not breaking the melody. "Let him be." That single gesture, simple, human, changed the room's energy. Security froze. The fan slowly sat back down, eyes wet, clutching the record to his chest. And Elvis kept singing. It wasn't just a performance anymore. It was absolution, offered to everyone in that room who had ever lost someone they still loved. As the bridge swelled, Priscilla's composure cracked. Her eyes glistened beneath the gold lights. Charlie Hodge noticed and subtly passed Elvis a tissue folded into the shape of a heart, something he'd done during rehearsals as a joke. Tonight, it felt like ceremony. Between verses, Elvis whispered, barely audible over the strings, "Don't cry, Scylla." No one but the front row caught it, but those who did never forgot. Have you ever witnessed someone ask for forgiveness without saying the words? Have you ever felt music become more honest than speech? The silence after that verse stretched longer than the note itself. Even the casino beyond the ballroom seemed to fade out. The slot machines, the laughter, the world. Then came a moment that no one could have scripted. A child's voice near the back. "Mama, why's he sad?" And the audience collectively exhaled. Elvis smiled faintly, almost grateful for the interruption. He took a breath and moved into the final refrain. "I wrote this song for the one who still knows my name. When the lights go out, I still see her flame." The crowd stayed perfectly still. No clapping, no cheers, just the hum of the monitors and the sound of his breath. When the final chord rang, he didn't bow. He just looked at Priscilla, nodded once and whispered, "Thank you." Camera pans slowly from Elvis's face to Priscilla's teary smile, then dissolves into crowd-wide silence. That was the moment Jerry realized the show had stopped being a concert. It had become a reconciliation, and the crowd, sensing they had witnessed something sacred, stayed silent too. But something unexpected was about to happen, something that would turn that silence into legend. The Hilton's lights dimmed deeper, until only one beam followed Elvis where he stood, frozen between confession and courage. The crowd held its breath, as if afraid that any movement would break whatever invisible spell was forming around him. Elvis looked over his shoulder to James Burton. "Let's take it from the top again," he said softly. The guitarist hesitated. "You sure, E? The Colonel's losing his mind back there." Elvis smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's the right song." He turned back to the mic and said it again, clear this time, for everyone to hear. "Play the one she doesn't know I finished." Gasps rippled through the audience. No one understood the meaning, but they felt it. And Priscilla, sitting motionless, eyes glassy beneath the ballroom lights, knew exactly what he meant. Slow zoom on Elvis's face as he steps into the light. Warm guitar reverb fades in, subtle tape hiss, heartbeat-like percussion underneath. The song began again, softer now. His voice carried a strange mix of tremor and command. Fragile yet anchored in years of longing. Every lyric spilled like a private letter finally mailed. "You were the morning I lost, and the dream I never left. If my voice breaks tonight, it's because the truth don't rest." He paused, eyes closed, breath uneven. Behind him, Glenn Hardin's piano gently traced the edges of the melody. Charlie Hodge leaned forward, whispering the harmony like a prayer. It was no longer a show. It was a man standing in the ruins of what love once built, asking the crowd to witness, not to judge. Then came the line that would later echo across fan recordings for decades. "If the world still spins without you, then I've got no rhythm left to fight." Priscilla's lip trembled. Jerry Schilling, watching from the wings, mouthed, "He's talking to her." The audience stayed utterly silent. You could hear the air conditioning hum, the light crack of an ice cube in a drink, even the gentle squeak of Elvis's stage boot against the floor. He glanced toward her, just once, and something inside him broke loose. The next verse wasn't planned. He ad-libbed it, voice cracking slightly. "They said time heals, but they never said how. I'm still learning to let you go, even now." That single verse changed the whole energy in the room. Elvis dropped to one knee at the mic, gripping it like it was the only thing holding him upright. Tears welled, but he didn't wipe them away. The crowd, witnessing a king stripped of his crown, didn't move. Even Colonel Parker for once stopped yelling. Mic feedback hums faintly. Someone sniffles in the audience. A distant shutter clicks. When the song reached its final refrain, Elvis didn't take the usual bow or reach for his scarf. He just let the silence fall, and then it happened. Priscilla stood. The audience gasped as she slowly approached the stage, escorted halfway by a nervous security guard. Elvis saw her coming and gave a small wave to let her pass. When she reached the edge of the stage, she looked up at him, not as a performer, not as the world's biggest star, but as the man she had once promised forever to. He leaned down, still breathing hard from the song, and whispered something that only the two of them could hear. No microphone, no spotlight, just two people in the middle of a memory. Those close enough swore she said one word back. "Beautiful." He smiled faintly. Then, without warning, he placed the folded lyric sheet, the one from his jacket pocket, into her hand. She froze, clutching it like it might vanish if she moved too quickly. A soft gasp, followed by the sound of someone crying in the front row. Elvis straightened, looked out at the audience and said quietly, "She always believed in the music before I did. So tonight, I wanted her to hear how it ends." That line, filmed on a shaky bootleg camera, would become one of the most quoted Elvis clips in fan history. Have you ever seen someone close a chapter without bitterness? Have you ever felt a goodbye that sounded like forgiveness? Then the lights faded, leaving only a single golden beam on the scarf still hanging from his mic stand. The band waited for a cue that never came. Elvis just stood there, eyes glistening, and whispered, "Thank you." No one cheered. No one moved. The Hilton Ballroom stayed in perfect, reverent silence. Every soul inside understanding they'd just witnessed something beyond music. But backstage, a cassette was still rolling, capturing every note, every breath, every second of that silence. And that tape would change the story forever. For a long moment, no one dared to move. The applause that usually thundered after every Elvis number never came. Instead, 20,000 people sat motionless, staring at the stage as if they were inside a cathedral. The silence was physical. You could feel it pressing against the skin. Even the chandeliers seemed frozen mid-glimmer. Then, one woman near the back began to hum the final line Elvis had just sung, slowly, softly. Others joined. Within seconds, the Hilton showroom, known for its clatter of laughter and roulette winners, had become a quiet choir. Wide crowd shot, tearful faces illuminated by soft golden light, faint hum turning into collective melody. Elvis's chest rose once, sharply. He looked out and saw the people swaying, not to rhythm, but to emotion. The crowd wasn't cheering for him anymore. They were completing the song with him. Charlie Hodge whispered from behind the amp, "You hear that, E?" They're singing it back. Elvis turned slightly, eyes wet. "Yeah," he murmured. They heard the truth. Then came a sight that reporters would later describe as spiritual. Priscilla, still clutching the lyric page, raised her free hand toward the stage. Just a small gesture of gratitude. Elvis met her eyes, nodded once, and took a step back from the mic. He didn't need to sing anymore. The crowd carried the melody, each person humming a different pitch, imperfect but unified. A sea of strangers, bankers, soldiers, mothers, gamblers, were suddenly one voice. Room tone deepens. The hum swells like a soft organ chord. Jerry Schilling, standing just off stage, felt a lump rise in his throat. "You'll never see anything like this again," he whispered to a nearby cameraman. The cameraman just nodded, lens trembling slightly as he filmed. When was the last time thousands of people chose silence over applause? When did music stop being entertainment and start becoming communion? Elvis closed his eyes, hands folded before him. He didn't bow. He didn't wave. He simply listened. For years, crowds had screamed his name, begged for scarves, pushed for photos. But tonight they gave him something else, something rarer, respect without noise. That's when he whispered into the mic, barely audible. "That's the sound I've been waiting for." The house lights began to rise slowly. The audience came to their feet, still quiet, still unified. When the final hum faded, the silence that followed felt earned, like the calm after a storm that finally passed. Colonel Parker, red-eyed and shaken, muttered under his breath, "They'll never forget this one." He was right. The Hilton Ballroom would host hundreds more shows after that night, but none would be remembered the same way. Because on that evening in November 1976, 20,000 people didn't just witness a concert. They participated in a healing. And somewhere between the last note and the final breath, Elvis Presley reminded the world that even silence can sing. But while the crowd left changed, something far more lasting was quietly being recorded on a small cassette still spinning backstage. Backstage, the air smelled of sweat, leather, and static. The band filed out quietly, no jokes, no chatter, just the hum of amplifiers cooling in the dark. Elvis stood alone by the mic stand, one hand still resting on the silk scarf that had swayed through the final verse. The crowd's silence lingered like perfume even after the hall had emptied. At the edge of the stage, a sound engineer named Rick Stanley knelt beside an old reel-to-reel recorder. Its spools kept spinning, capturing the tail end of the night, the breaths, the rustle of paper, the quiet shuffle of a legend walking away. He looked up, unsure if he should stop the tape. Charlie Hodge waved gently. "Let it run." Elvis turned toward Jerry Schilling, eyes tired but peaceful. "You think they got it all?" Jerry nodded. "Every word, man. Every silence." Elvis smiled faintly. "Good. Some things deserve proof." Tape reel spinning, glowing red light on recorder, close-up of lyric sheet in Priscilla's hand. Scarf draped over mic stand. In the lobby, reporters waited with flashbulbs ready, but neither Elvis nor Priscilla spoke. She walked out through the side exit, still holding the folded lyric sheet. Security tried to escort her, but she waved them off, saying softly, "He's already given me what I came for." That lyric page, creased, smudged with his thumbprint, would later resurface in a Graceland archive decades later. Labeled in pencil, untitled song, Priscilla, November 76. Meanwhile, the bootleg tape made its own journey. The engineer, Rick, made a quiet copy before turning in the master. He mailed it to a friend in Memphis with a simple note. "Keep this safe. It's not a performance, it's a moment." Years later, the cassette would circulate among die-hard collectors under an anonymous title, The Silent Show. Fans would whisper that if you listened close, enough, right after the final verse, you could hear Elvis whisper her name. Isn't it strange? How the smallest details outlive the loudest applause. How one note, one look, can echo longer than a lifetime of fame. Back in his dressing room, Elvis sat quietly, towel over his shoulders. He didn't speak for a long time. The mirror reflected a man who had just emptied every truth he had left. Finally, he whispered, "That's the last time I'll sing it." Charlie, sitting across from him, frowned. "You mean tonight?" Elvis shook his head. "I mean ever." Outside, the crowd was gone, replaced by quiet corridors and the click of distant slot machines. Yet inside that small room, something permanent had been set down, on tape, on paper, and in memory. Elvis picked up the white scarf from the chair and folded it neatly. "If they remember anything," he said softly, "let it be the silence." And with that, he walked out, leaving the lights on and the scarf draped over the mirror's edge. That was the last night anyone ever heard that song. But its echo, caught on a forgotten tape, was just beginning to travel. Years later, people still argued over what really happened that night at the Hilton. Some swore Elvis planned it. Others said he simply followed his heart in the moment. But anyone who was there agreed on one thing. The silence was real. There was no encore, no curtain call, just a man who had built his life in sound finding peace in stillness. That's what struck fans most deeply. Elvis didn't need applause that night. He needed understanding. When the bootleg tape began to circulate, listeners described the same sensation. It feels like he's singing directly to someone you lost. The pauses, the trembling notes, they weren't mistakes, they were messages. Black and white photos of the Hilton marquee, fans holding tickets, a tape reel spinning slowly, Priscilla's folded lyric sheet beside a vase of lilies. Music historians would later call it his most vulnerable moment on record. But the fans knew better. It wasn't a record. It was a reconciliation disguised as a performance. When was the last time you stopped talking long enough to let someone else's truth reach you? That night taught a lesson far beyond fame or tragedy. That sometimes the loudest acts of love aren't spoken, sung, or shouted. They're felt in the quiet that follows. And that silence, the one that filled the Hilton in November of 1976, still speaks. Spring, 1977. Months before the world would lose him, a letter arrived at Graceland addressed simply, "To E, from C." Inside was the lyric page he'd handed her that night, folded once, preserved carefully. Beneath his handwriting, she had written just 3 words in blue ink. "You were heard." Charlie Hodge found it later among unopened fan mail, slipped between postcards and gifts. He showed it to Elvis quietly. For a long while, Elvis said nothing. Then he placed the page back inside the envelope, smiled faintly and whispered, "Then it was worth it." Slow pan across Graceland's empty hallways, the scarf on the mirror, tape reels sealed in storage. That envelope still rests in the archives. No plaque, no spotlight, just a small reminder that forgiveness doesn't always need applause. Sometimes love's greatest encore is silence. If this story moved you, share it forward. Somewhere out there, someone still needs to hear that even silence can say, "I forgive you," because legends aren't remembered for how loud they lived, but for the quiet truths they finally dared to sing.